everyone. We're going to talk today about solving the perils of isolation through senior living. And I think by now, after a long year that we've dealt with, a lot of us know what social isolation means. So we really want to discuss this and talk about how we can thrive during times when we've got a lot of social isolation and loneliness going on. And what does that look like? And how can senior living help meet that need for our seniors? So before we get started, we will introduce ourselves. So I am Crystal Roberts, National Director of Resident Enrichment. I have the lovely pleasure of serving our 33 communities in helping with enrichment, memory care, and our MBK Fit program. So we are very excited to share some stuff with you today and hopefully answer some of your questions at the end of this webinar.
Yeah, I'm Diana Engle, Regional Director of Resident Enrichment for MBK Senior Living, and my long blonde hair died during the pandemic, had to be cut off. So, but that is a picture of me. I've worked in senior living for 30 years now in a variety of settings, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about how senior living can help with the perils of isolation. Okay, Crystal.
All right. So we want to do a 2020 call to action. So this is actually a study or a report you can look up. The National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine Committee on the Health of Medical Dimensions of Social Isolation and Loneliness in Older Adults. Feel free to take all that down and put it into Google. We want to share some really interesting results from this report that came about during studies. Number one, before I start, I want to talk about the difference between social isolation and loneliness. Social isolation is having no connection to others or to your community or to people. It's really what our seniors have gone through, and a lot of people have gone through this last year of being stuck at home and not having those connections like we normally have. But social isolation leads to loneliness. Loneliness is something, it's a feeling that people have. And I always have said this, loneliness is something that it doesn't matter if you're in a group of 100 or with yourself. Loneliness is the feeling you have, that there's no connection. So sometimes families will say, well, mom doesn't need to move in anywhere. We have a big family. She lives with us at home. But the problem is you can live with a lot of people and still feel really lonely. So it's meeting that need of that person, giving them those things that they need to help combat that isolation and loneliness. But let us share a few facts with you first. Number one, half of seniors 65 live in social isolation. Think about that. Every senior you know, 1 out of 2 of them are living in isolation at this point in time. Maybe they don't drive. Maybe they don't have friends that visit. Maybe their friends can't drive anymore. Maybe they don't have that ability to get out and do those things they used to, especially this last year. It's been very difficult for everyone. And it's really important to think about when you look at some of these statistics on the screen. I want to give you a little bit of information. People who have loneliness and feel loneliness have a really big medical issue. They have increased cardiac issues, blood pressure. It can even increase your cholesterol. It also can lead to stroke and other issues, not to mention depression and those things that can really make someone not feel great when it comes to mental health. So 1/3 of people over 60 report living with loneliness. Think about everyone you know in your life that is over 60. 1/3 of those people feel lonely. They may not tell you that, but they feel lonely. I think everyone on this call can relate to being in a situation, even maybe if it was this last year before, where you just felt lonely, like you had no one or anything to go to. And it's a really sad feeling to think about, because when we have loneliness and it increases our risk of depression and actually can increase your risk of dementia, your actual mortality rate can increase by 26%. So that feeling of loneliness, of not having anyone, is a 26% increased risk of someone dying, just from that alone. This other fact is really interesting. 50 to 91% of people had better chances through connectedness, which is not being isolated and feeling lonely. They actually have a better chance of survival. This has become such an issue for so many people that most countries have now taken to a new sort of what I call unique idea. The UK, Singapore, and Germany, all 3 are just some examples, and I want you to really look this up on Google when we're done with this call to look it up, have what are called social prescribing. It is literally where a medical doctor says, wow, I've done everything medically for this person and they still feel lonely and depressed and isolated. So they now have what's called social prescribing. They literally connect them to a person whose sole job is to holistically look at this person and say, okay, Diana, you're still feeling lonely and not connected to anyone. Tell me what your hobbies and interests are. You love gardening. By the way, did you know there's a local community garden right down from your house where you can garden with children? Or Diana, did you know there's a book on tape group that you can belong to online? Or you like volunteering. Let me give you the volunteer opportunities in your community. And by the way, when we talk about some of these things, some of these are things you can do without leaving your house. There are great volunteer opportunities that people can do online, even calling other seniors to help them feel connected to each other. When we think about this, countries like Germany are a great example. They looked at the perils of loneliness and said, this is an epidemic. We have people who feel like they are not connected to anything or anyone, and how sad and lonely must that feel to wake up every day and have nothing or no one. So they actually set up a whole entire group of people to address this concern, to help their seniors and their residents of their local areas feel connected to other people and have that ability to connect to others. We are pack creatures by nature. We need to be around other people. Even some of you have done some, what I call, technology connection. It never makes up for that fact of when you see someone's face in purpose, in real life, when you get to see them, that moment of feeling it gives you just to see other people. So when we talk about, isolation and loneliness, it has a horrific medically, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And these are things that can really impact someone's overall quality of life. Because when you think about it, the last thing that you want to think is that someone that you love so much is sitting at home and they feel like they have nothing to look forward to every day. The thought of that, even thinking about for myself, makes me sad to think how some people, when you look at these numbers are real numbers. This is a report that you can actually get if you look it up. It's also something we'd be glad to email you a link if you'd like it. But I think we have to really face the facts that we're dealing with something that's really impacting seniors on a very big level, and it's affecting their quality of life. It's affecting how they feel about themselves every day. And that's something that we have the ability to make a difference for our residents and our seniors, and for those of you on the call. And we want to share some of this stuff with you today because I think it will really help you understand there's some easy, great things that we can do, and it doesn't really take a whole lot to get it done.
So that same 2020 report that Crystal was talking about, put forth by a committee that was assembled by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, identified several specific factors that were considered to be either risk factors or protective factors for seniors living at home in the communities. So I want to run through some of those with you because we're going to address some of these things when we talk about how to address the problem. And the first factor that really matters in terms of whether people are at risk for isolation and loneliness is level of physical ability. So physical ability and general physical condition is a big risk factor for being lonely or isolated at home. And another big one is functional ability. So whether or not people can perform their own what's called activities of daily living. So whether they're self-caring or whether they need people to care for them is another factor in people's lives that can put them more at risk for loneliness and isolation. And then there are sensory factors. And primarily with the sensory factors are limited hearing and vision. So when people are visually impaired or they have hearing impairments, it's another risk factor for them. And there are also social environmental factors such as driving status. Crystal alluded to that earlier, when people can no longer drive themselves around and are dependent on others for transportation. That is considered to be a risk factor. And then mental health or psychiatric disorders, and in particular, anxiety and depression. And anxiety and depression it's bi-directional in terms of the research, but these things play back and forth with each other. So if you have a depression diagnosis, or you have agoraphobia or panic disorder, or anxiety disorder, you are more likely to be isolated, and therefore you're more likely to report loneliness. Now, the other thing is that the more isolated and lonely you are, the more at risk you are for developing anxiety and depression and some of those other disorders. So these go back and forth and can snowball into a kind of a great big problem for people. The other category that's pretty significant is level of cognitive ability. And what they generally find is that people whose memories are starting to be a challenge will isolate on their own, mostly because of social stigma or embarrassment. You know, maybe they can't remember the names of people at church anymore, and it's just so frustrating for them that they stop wanting to go to church. Now, that's another bi-directional thing, in that if you're having some memory loss and then you kind of willingly isolate yourself, your memory loss can be greatly enhanced by the isolation and also the depression and anxiety, which will impact your dementia. So that's another one that can snowball into a great big issue for people. And then, as Crystal said earlier, also the proximity of supportive relationships. So when people have friends and family and neighbors and supportive folks directly around them, they're a lot more protected against loneliness and isolation. So that's considered a protective factor to have your family near, or your loved ones or your neighbors who support you. And then another big category that the committee discovered that they really wanted to target, and is also near and dear to us at MBK, are some of the demographic factors. So for example, our LGBTQ elder folks living out in the communities are far more likely to be isolated, the studies have found, and therefore lonely, and then have some of the anxiety and depression and other things that go along with that. Also people from immigrant families, and then there's also a gender difference, and for that, it's actually that men are more at risk for loneliness and isolation. And the general thinking behind that is that the traditional female role within social networks is that we're kin keepers. We keep connections with people, we nurture connections with people. And then the traditional male role, now again, I'm just talking general terms, is not so much to be involved with nurturing lifelong friendships and connections and stuff. So men are more at risk for loneliness and isolation kind of across the board. So now that I've listed some of those things, we really want to dive into letting you know how we, at MBK and how in senior living, we work hard to address those factors that I just listed in terms of risk factors, and to really promote wellness among residents who live in senior living. And I think one of the obvious factors is that in a senior living community, a lot of people are there. It's not just the neighbors, the other residents, but there are all of the employees who work at the community and all of the volunteers that we have and entertainers, and there are a lot of people. But we're going to go into some more detail, and I want those of you who are caregiving at home to know that it isn't just about having people coming and going. It really is about setting it up to create meaningful bonding and connection for folks that really can help us fend off loneliness and isolation. So with that, Crystal is going to kick us off here with our first category of wellness.
So let's talk about wellness in general. So some things that we do for wellness, and I just want to point out, first of all, this lovely picture that you're looking at is actually from one of our communities. And, we talk about that loneliness of when someone is at home and isolated, that can be really sad. But in a community, we do fun things like have someone take the popcorn cart around in the afternoon for a snack time. So someone's knocking on your door in this fabulous costume, which by the way would make you laugh no matter what, because this costume is funny. But it just gives someone something to look forward to. So having things like these things, where we have snacks that go around in costumes. We have happy hour carts where someone's knocking on your door and bringing you your favorite margarita and checking in to see how you're doing and finding out what you need for the day. It seems small and insignificant, but when that happens throughout the day and throughout the week, that builds really nice for someone looking forward to that visit and that knock on the door to see a friendly face. Because like we said earlier, connectedness during this last year has been a lot by technology, and technology is absolutely fabulous, and we're going to talk about it. But it doesn't take the place of seeing that smiling real person that walks into your room and tells you how great it is to see you for the day and how thankful it is that you're there with them. So it's one of those pieces that when we talk about it, it once again seems small, but has a huge impact. A couple other things we do are MBK Fit. We have fitness instructors where we're offering fitness programs. You heard Diana say physical limitations can create isolation for people. If you can no longer walk or drive yourself or do the things you need to do, you're dependent on others to come to you. So we have fitness programs, routines that are set up regularly, where even having a one-on-one of someone knocking on your door and doing stretches and exercises with you to keep you motivated. You heard Diana also talk about, and I talked about, isolation and loneliness leads to depression. If you dealt with people who have depression, they're not very motivated. They need that push to keep them going along. So having that fitness person whose sole job is to get them excited about having that relationship with them, but by the way, while we're doing it, we're gonna go on a walk outside, or we're gonna do some stretches, or we're gonna follow up with your physical therapy exercises. Because as most of us know, if anyone on this call has attended physical therapy or occupational therapy, we do a good job going to those things, but after it's over, we don't always continue the exercises to keep ourselves moving forward like we should. So having that fitness program, where even during the situation with COVID, we had no groups. There were still streaming activities where people could join a yoga, a meditation, or a fitness class. Or like I said, having someone knock on your door and say, hey, Sally, I'm here to take you for your walk today. It's having that one-on-one time, having someone that knows you, that relationship of host, hey, Sally, now that you've been here for a week, I brought you some Hershey Kisses, which you can eat after we do our exercises, because I know that rewards you and motivates you at the same time. So part of that is that relationship building. But really focusing on keeping people physically independent longer keeps them to have the ability to not suffer from isolation. So it's really critical at home. You do some things for physical fitness, stretches, exercise. Most times nowadays on YouTube, you can get 100,000 free chair yoga classes. My mother-in-law is 80 and she does them all the time at my house. There's a Hawaiian dance one that she loves to do all day long, but it keeps her moving, which is critically important instead of being stuck at home and doing nothing but napping all day. So once again, that fitness is really pinnacle for people's isolation to not exist. The other thing that we have is PT and OT in our communities. So having that ability to have that person who has a specialty to be on site to help deal with some of the issues that may be medically necessary, as far as maybe someone that had a stroke that needs help walking or regaining the strength in their hand to use a fork again, to be independent with their own eating, or even use a phone to call their family because they can't dial the buttons. So having those things available to help assess what materials or items they might need to be successful. For example, maybe they need a certain type of cane. People think a cane is a cane. A lot of times I will see seniors out and about, they buy the cane at Walmart. And that cane, although it's helpful, may not be the appropriate thing for you. So having someone that can actually assess what your needs are and get you the right equipment to allow you to be independent is fabulous for someone's self-esteem. We talked about those mental health issues with isolation. We also have telehealth. So now you can keep your medical appointments, talk to your doctor, and oh, by the way, speak to your therapist or psychiatrist because mental health has suffered greatly through isolation. So we can arrange those now where seniors don't have to go out and we can bring it to your door. So it makes it very nice and easy for families to have these family meetings with doctors when we have telehealth available for our residents. Because as you heard Diana say, part of what we're talking about these issues are physical, overall health and functionability. So having that connection to the medical professionals who can help get us the needs, meet our needs, and find out what's happening with that person. Also too, health services. We have a great health service department in all of our communities. Our nurses, our health service assistants, our caregivers, people who are checking in, making sure that medications are given appropriately, that you're checking in to make sure you've attended your fitness class, knocking on your door to see how your day is going, to making sure they have what you need. When you think about it, a resident in a building, sometimes I want to think is like if you've ever stayed the night in the hospital and you think you're going to get a really good night's sleep because you're sick and the buzzers go off all the time. Sometimes I think about how many times people knock on someone's door. But it's great because it's more people connecting to your loved one that wouldn't be there if they weren't with us. And then we want to talk about the dining. And once again, back to these carts and happy hours. We've done some great things. First of all, food is great for immunity. Immunity is great to fight off COVID-19. Immunity and also having good nutrition is a great way to keep your body balanced, which once again goes back to those things we talked about. So having a dining program that's set up. In our communities, we have buildings that do immunity boosting snacks where they're getting pomegranates. And by the way, you're getting an information pamphlet on why pomegranates are good for you and your brain. So really having that great nutrition. Once again, that's 3 times a day. Someone's knocking on that door to bring you your food and check in on you and see how you're doing. And it's helping develop those relationships. And then we have our COVID-19 precautions. Everything we do, from our testing to how people visit, to the way we handle people when they become sick and feel ill and aren't doing well, to making sure that people have ability to get their vaccines. So it's having those things that are set up to keep people safe, but also, once again, can be engaging and connect you to other people. I think about my mother-in-law who recently, was living home alone. None of this was going on for her. She was having problems driving. She was having a lot of anxiety and depression about having problems driving. So having someone that can check in and knock on the door and say, hey, you know what, you don't need to come to me for exercise. I'm going to come to you. And we're going to make it fun, and we're going to develop a relationship, and I'm going to know everything about you to keep you motivated. That's a great thing to give someone. Once again, we keep using the word connected, but it really is connecting to others. And that makes people feel special, loved, and wanted. And it is a fabulous place to be.
Oops, sorry. The other area of promoting connectedness among our residents, I put into the category here of true belonging, so that it's clear that it's more than just being around other people and having those kind of typical daily social interactions, but we do everything that we can to gather all the information that we can about individual people so that we can truly put forward social programs that group people according to their interests and also their social comfort levels. We know that not everybody is a total extrovert who wants to be around people all the time. We have a lot of people who are quite private and even not in a pandemic time would choose to spend most of their time in their apartment. And so it really becomes our job to find ways to give people a sense of belonging and connection, which absolutely can thwart loneliness and isolation, even when that person doesn't really want to come to big group programs. So one of the things that we have had going on all along is that we do provide daily social programs. For quite some time there, they were pretty much virtual or very, very distanced. Now we're getting to open up a little bit more and have people come together still in a safe way, but we're getting more in-person visiting and social programs going on. And one of the things that we have continued to do that I think is probably one of the best ways that senior living residents come together is by grouping them and having various clubs and committees. So we have, for example, we have resident committees that inform our chef about their preferences and what they would like to see in the dining world. So we have a chef's corner or we have a dining committee. Each community kind of has its own language for these things too, because the residents have a great voice in how they want to do their various clubs and committees. So there are gardening clubs and drama clubs and poetry clubs. Pretty much any interest you can think of. If we have 2 people that want to get together and talk about that, we form a club. And one of the things that's positive that came out of the pandemic, and I don't want to sound Pollyanna, but it really forced us to embrace technology. And the seniors, any of them who were still pretty reluctant about, not wanting to learn, your fancy smartphone technology or get on an iPad. They've worked through that now because this is a great way to stay connected with their neighbors in the assisted living community that they live in. And of course, also with family all over the world. And slowly but surely, we're watching that resistance to technology melt away and people get more and more interested in connecting with each other virtually, that's just been fantastic. And so also for those of you who are caregiving at home, you can find social meetup groups, sing-along groups that are specifically for caregivers taking care of someone. For example, if you have a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia that's living with you at home, you can find groups of other people who are meeting together on Zoom and doing sing-along or reminiscing. And there are also pre-recorded reminiscing tapes. There are virtual buddies that will interact. So, you know, there are things out there. So I encourage you to do some research and investigation of that. The other thing that we do is in terms of our care philosophy at MBK Senior Living, it is a relationship-based care model. So we are looking to train all of the associates that work in our community to enhance their connections with the residents. And so, for example, our caregivers who provide the direct care to our senior living residents, they're not just encouraged. We actually insist that they participate in some of the fun social programming that we do. And there is a reason for that. There's science behind that. When people come together and engage in certain kinds of activities, brain chemicals are released that make people trust each other more, and also that relieve anxiety and can also relieve depression. So oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, these are the kinds of chemicals. Oxytocin will come out if Crystal and I just share a bar of chocolate together, our oxytocin already starts pumping. Laughter, it really is the best medicine because of the way that it boosts your brain chemistry. When you're laughing with another person, reminiscing with another person, singing with another person, this trust bond develops. And so in a way, it's a tool that we give our teams, you know, inside of senior living to be more successful at caring for the seniors that it is their job to care for. Those of you, again, who have caregivers coming into your home, I would really encourage you to set up some fun and games and laughter and singing between your loved one and the caregivers that are coming into the home. And you will see big dividends in terms of all kinds of things, but certainly reduced anxiety and a closer bond. And also we do find less resistance to our help when people begin to trust us. So that's a really big piece of the connection. I think sometimes like when you're talking to people about the benefit of living in senior living and the social connection that people will have, they might focus on the other residents that are there, and certainly coming together with other residents is part of it. But I think the even bigger social bond is with our team members who are there. Anyway, so we also do a lot of happy hours and entertainment, which we did virtually when we couldn't gather socially. And now we're doing sometimes all in person and sometimes a hybrid where some people are using Eversound or similar headphones to listen in from their apartment because we're only allowed to have maybe 10 people together. But we found all kinds of workarounds to make sure that we're still having our happy hours. And like Crystal said, we do happy hour carts, so you get your margarita delivered to your door if you can't come down to the happy hour gathering. And another big thing is what at MBK we call Yoishigoto. And that is basically our involvement in the greater outside community. And Crystal is going to talk a lot about how having a sense of purpose is a key protective factor for people against loneliness and isolation. A lot of times, our best efforts to help and care for people can backfire. And what I mean by that is that knowing that I need someone else to care for me that's one of the risk factors. And so it's intimidating for me, it's embarrassing for me, I don't want people to help me. And so when we can balance that awkwardness of being in a care environment with giving our residents a ton of opportunity to care for other people, it really tilts that balance back into being happier and healthier. So I'm not going to say much more about that, but Yoishigoto is one of our structured belonging activities. Oh, I will say one more thing for those of you, again, caring for someone at home. If you can find ways to, you and your loved one, do things like help kids with their homework, or do something that gives back to the greater community, even if it's picking up trash in your neighborhood when you do your daily walks together, that's another thing that will really, really help. So, okay, with that, I'm going to pass it to Crystal.
All right. My topic, purpose. I read this great quote one time. It says, 2 important times in your life is the day you were born and the day you found your purpose. Just because you have a job doesn't mean it's your purpose. When you think about a purpose, when everyone wakes up every morning, you should have something to look forward to be excited about, to be involved with. Having a sense of purpose is really getting to know someone on an individual basis. You heard Diana speak earlier. We do some collection of information to find out who is the person. What is your background? What do you like? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? What did you used to do that you can't do anymore? And how can we adapt that to make it work for you? But having that sense of purpose gives someone a place in life. I always feel so upset when I hear someone say, oh, there's nothing for me to do. That person doesn't have a purpose every morning. I go back to what I said in the beginning. To think that someone wakes up every day and says, well, I have nothing to look forward to. No one's going to come visit. I have nothing to do all day but sit here by myself. It's a horrible mindset to be in on a regular basis. So having that sense of purpose is finding what makes your heart sing or makes you happy or makes you feel good. For those of you that do caregiving as a profession, like a lot of us, this is usually our purpose. My purpose and Diana's purpose is to make the quality of life of the residents and the staff and families better. And it's a big job, but it's a job that we love because it makes a huge difference for people. Having someone have a smile on their face because they woke up in the morning and thought they had nothing to look forward to, and we bring them their favorite cupcakes to frost with all the different frostings, and they get to do it with their grandkids on Zoom at the same time, is a great sense of purpose. It's that connection again. Without a sense of purpose, I feel like people are aimlessly wandering around. And before I go any further, I want to go back and say, this social prescribing really helps people find their sense of purpose. And I do this a lot in our company, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I've been sitting here holding my hands down under the desk, not wanting to do it, but I'm going to anyway. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically meeting needs of people so they're feeling the best that they can possibly be, and the top being self-actualization and great self-esteem. We find out who someone is from those traditions and backgrounds, and we help create programs that they want to be involved with. Not what everybody else wants to do, but what you want to do to make a difference. It may be a retired teacher who now can do coaching and classes by Zoom for helping people who are struggling in school. Right now, we have a lot of parents who are homeschooling in a lot of different states, and they could probably use some really good backup of some great teachers who could really help give them some help and coaching, especially anyone at home that's got kids right now. You're probably like, oh my God, I would love to have a math teacher do some tutoring over algebra because I myself can't even figure out what this equation means, much less how to help my child. So think about being able to provide an opportunity where your loved one gets to fulfill that need of being a teacher again, helping children read at elementary school, hosting a reading circle, having those things that once again may not seem really fun to others, but could really give someone that heart moment I call of feeling like they have a purpose again. We forget as people retire and their lives change. You heard Diana say the physical, all those functionabilities. It really boxes people into having less interactions. So having that ability to have people around you that once again, not only have you found your purpose, but we have the same purpose together, that makes a great connection for someone. I've used this a lot in our training in our company, and I want to tell this story because I feel it's so appropriate right now on talking about loneliness and purpose. But if you have seen my favorite movie, Tom Hanks, Castaway, and if you've not watched it, I really want to encourage you to go rent it. I know sometimes people get tired of me talking about it, but it's important because I want you to think about one thing. In that movie, Castaway, Tom Hanks was on a deserted island by himself with a bunch of FedEx packages. And he found a package that had a volleyball in it. And after he cut his hand, he made a face on the volleyball because he was so lonely, he just wanted a friend. someone to have dinner with, to talk to spend time with, and it was a volleyball. But that volleyball to him meant everything in the world. It was his purpose. He got excited to spend his time with his friend. And for any of you that watched this movie, and it's an old movie, so I'm sure a lot of us have watched it, when Tom escaped from the island and was on his raft to get away, his volleyball floated off the raft into the ocean. And every person across the world cried 1,000 tears. Over a volleyball, I want to remind everyone. We were so connected and invested in that relationship of that volleyball, and Wilson was his name, by the way, if you don't know, that I always say to our team when we do training, what is each of your residents' Wilson? Who is their connected? Who is their sense of purpose that they wake up every day and say, I can't wait to be with this person or to do this because it makes me feel great. It gave me something to look forward to every day. That's what your purpose is for. Our job in our communities is to identify the purposes and create those moments so people can have that connection again. How do we do that? First of all, individual hobbies and interests. You may have residents that love to sew and a resident who says, I've never touched a sewing needle in my life. Don't ask me to go to that group. But for those residents who love to sew, it gives them a chance to, once again, find someone who has the same commonalities and develop those relationships. And by the way, we talk about Yo Ishigoto, which is doing the good work and volunteering out in the world. The best people that we have that can make a difference in volunteering are the seniors who are sitting home and need something to do. They're in their legacy phase. They want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to tell you your stories. If you've ever ran into a senior somewhere, you can tell they're lonely when they start talking to you because it sounds like no one else probably ever listens because they don't have that anymore. They don't have connection. So us putting community projects, service volunteers together are great. I can take a group of ladies who like to sew and we can do blankets for women at the homeless shelter. We can also create blankets for, the residents at other communities like long-term care communities so they can help those people too. So it's finding those hobbies and interests and finding a way to take that purpose and make it come to life for that resident. So they feel when they lay their head on the pillow at night, I did something good. I was wanted, I was needed, and I had a purpose today. And it wasn't just to sit in front of the TV, but I got to make a difference in somebody's life. I got to help out. It's also important that we look at interests, that when we do our programming, we create those groups like Diana said, the people who love children, the people who love pets, the people who want to tend to the garden. All of those things have great benefits, but it's even better when you can do it with a group of friends. Because once again, I look forward to seeing my new friends every day. The other thing we talk about a lot is defining roles within a community. And what that means is when you are introducing residents and get to know them, you can say, I want to introduce you to Crystal. She's the best gardener we ever had in this building. She keeps all of our plants growing. And by the way, you're going to meet Charles. Charles takes care of all of our pets in the house. He walks them, he feeds them, he makes sure they get what they need. Because maybe there's a resident who can't take care of that pet. But this gives Charles a sense of purpose because maybe he's a retired veterinarian and he misses living on a farm with his 40 cows and 30 chickens. We may not be able to take him to the farm all the time, but we can bring some experiences to him. It's finding that person who maybe used to be the postmaster for years at the post office, now retired, and they can sort through all the mail for everyone and get it in piles for everyone to go out or pass it to the doors if they're able to. Or maybe it's that resident who used to volunteer all the time and they can't go to church anymore like they want to, especially with COVID, but they can call in on other seniors and read them some Bible verses and check in on them and see how they're doing. Because to think about it, I go back to this, for someone to feel like they have no purpose every day, that in itself to me is horribly depressing to think about. This picture of what you're looking at on this screen right here are our residents in a community with a great purpose. And that's a volunteer project of giving back to others. And this is what they're doing, is sorting this stuff and getting it ready to go. So it's not our staff that does this. They do it with them. It's our residents that lead it. You heard Diana talk about committees. We have volunteer committees where our residents say, we want to raise money for this and we'd like to help with that. We had a building that literally raised enough money to save the horse patrol in the city for a whole year on their budget because it was so important to the residents to do that. We've had residents whose sole purpose was to raise funds for families when their homes were flooded and there was nobody else in town raising money to help out. So when you think about it, giving someone a role and a place to be in charge of, I'm in charge of the volunteer committee. Diana's in charge of the dining committee. That way it gives me, once again, a purpose to fulfill. People have worked hard their whole lives. They have raised their families. They've had jobs and roles. And all of a sudden you retire. And if that doesn't continue, you see people sliding in depression and some of those things that we talked about, isolation. So keeping that balance of physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental health is really critical. Some other opportunities we provide to our residents are programs like resident ambassadors. These are what I call my social Sally's happy wagons. These are the people when you move into your neighborhood, they knock on your door and bring you the plate of cookies. We do the same thing here. We have resident ambassadors who want to get to know all the new people because then they're going to say, hey, Diana, I know you love doing this and this, and I'm going to introduce you to Charles because he loves watercolors too. So once again, having someone help create those connections is critical. You know, connections don't just happen because you move into a building or a neighborhood. If you ever move into a new house, people don't just run to your home to get to meet you. It's some effort both ways. And sometimes with our seniors, when they're stuck at home, they don't have that person to help make those connections. So having those ambassadors that can say, let me find some things to show you or people to introduce you to that love the same things you do. And back to what Diana said earlier about our staff fit into a great sense of purpose. Because when they have those special interests and hobbies, like being an artist or baking or cooking or designing, clothes, they can then bring that hobby in and share it with the residents, which gives both people a sense of purpose. So it flows both ways. It goes back to having those connections and those moments. And once again, getting involved in community issues is really critical. A therapist years ago said to me, if you really feel bad about yourself and you're suffering with depression and anxiety, sometimes the best thing you can do is go help others to realize your life is not so bad. So having those moments when you can go down and pass out food to the people at the homeless shelter makes you realize that my life really is good. Why am I complaining when there's so many other people I can help? But I have to be able to help someone to feel better about myself. And those opportunities have to be provided. And this is I gotta be honest, in our company, it's one thing that we do really, really well is great community service outreach. I am a gigantic believer. People, once again, will feel better about themselves if they can help others. You've heard the old adage, I felt sad for myself because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. So once again, putting your life in perspective of where things are can really help sometimes. And you heard Diana talk about, there's a lot of things that people can do from home too, but it's really nice to know that not only am I getting knocks on the door all the day and food delivered and people who know me and my fitness instructor is going to bring me chocolate if I promise to walk 6 miles next week, because I'm going to have a nurse who's going to come check in on me and make sure that I'm feeling well, my medications are doing okay, and that I'm feeling like I have someone. And by the way, a resident ambassador who's going to call me and knock on my door and say, hey, don't forget, happy hour, you're the brand new resident. We're going to introduce you to everybody today. We like to do little block parties where neighborhoods, hallways will have their own little block parties like you do in your neighborhood at your house. So it's having those things that create neighbors and a neighborhood and a place for someone not to exist, but to thrive and to love, to look forward to seeing their neighbors every day. So when they wake up and go for breakfast, they go, hey, where's Charles? He didn't come this morning. I really miss him. Because that gives people that connection, that love and purpose and belonging. There's another thing that we do too, and this is something anyone can do at home, nurturing. Taking care of something else has great medical benefit to making someone feel better. Believe it or not, studies show even a houseplant, taking care of something, this is why gardening is so good for mental health and other things, taking care of a houseplant of something that you cultivate, you water. And if you watch TV recently, you sing too because singing to plants makes them grow bigger. You get to see something that you're putting time and effort into bloom into something beautiful. That's a great sense of purpose and accomplishment. Same thing with pets. I find it sad sometimes in senior living and people are like, well, mom's getting old, so we're just gonna take her dog away. It's too much work. No, please don't do that. That dog gives mom purpose. You would be shocked to know how many seniors, and actually how many of you on this call that have your own pets, live your life for your pets now. You walk them, you feed them, you play with them, you take care of them. But it gives you a sense of purpose. There are a lot of people who are like, I don't want to go for a walk, but I have to because I have 2 dogs and I need to go for a walk. So that can really help someone feel better. And then last but not least is connection to kids and children. Finding those connections, whether it's grandkids or like I said, the reading groups, those things that we do that allow someone to nurture those relationships. Adopt a grandparent program is beautiful for people. It gives them a chance of maybe someone who didn't have grandchildren, right? has a chance to adopt someone at the elementary school that they can have phone calls and pen pals with, and when available can come and share cupcakes and talk about life, because it gives them, once again, that sense of purpose. Maybe I loved, enjoyed being a mom, and all my kids are grown, and now they have great grandkids, and I don't get to see them that much, but I can have a connection to help other children. So when we talk about purpose, the reason we left it for the end is this, to me, is the pinnacle of everything. This is the pinnacle of, do I feel loved and belonging? Because that gives me purpose every day. And it's a big check to write, but it's a beautiful when you see it come to fruition. Because it is critical, once again, that you ask yourself, whether you're at home, you have a loved one at home that doesn't live with you, this person has a sense of purpose. How have I helped mom reach her sense of purpose? She used to be the secretary at the church and do all the birthday and anniversary cards, and now she can't do that anymore. How can I make that happen for her again? So she feels that she has something that she is wanted and needed to do every day. Every human being in the world needs a sense of purpose. Without a sense of purpose, you're literally on a sailboat without a sail, floating aimlessly in the ocean. And it's a very lonely, sad place to be every day. Our job is to help provide those opportunities and things that make people feel loved and wanted, because that is what it's about at the end of the day. It's improving quality of life for people so they can live the best life they possibly can live, no matter how we have to adapt it, connect it, come around it, or rework it. The whole goal is that this purpose feels like a purpose for me. I am needed, and this is a place where it can provide it. And once again, the amount of unique people we have, from our residents to our staff and our entertainers and volunteers, there's so many options for engagement and getting to identify that sense of purpose. One of the biggest things you should probably ask your loved one if you're at home is, Mom, what's your sense of purpose? You'd be sad to know a lot of people don't even know their sense of purpose. You may not even know your sense of purpose, but I promise you, the moment you find it, the world will look different to you. And that's where we want our residents to be. So with that, we are going to move on. And I believe we did get a list of questions prior from the audience. So I wanted to read those and we can go through them. So, and then Diana and I are both just going to jump in here and talk about these. So we apologize if we talk over, but we both, I think, have great information to give. Question number 1, where do we go from here, COVID, in making our seniors stronger mentally, emotionally, and physically? So Diana, you want to go first? Do you want me to?
Well, you know, the best thing that I think we can do in terms of moving forward. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Am I muted? No, I'm not. In terms of moving forward post, well, you know, one of the things is that we don't know what's pre, during, and post with this whole thing. And so, you know, from our point of view, gathering all the lessons that we've learned and implementing new ways of doing things, and just making that, oh, I hate using the phrase the new normal, but kind of making that the new normal, you know, as I talked about before with our residents, really learning to embrace technology in a way that they haven't before in my years in working in senior living. And, you know, moving forward with continuing to offer programs virtually is going to be important for us. And for those of you caregiving at home, you know, finding those people who are, you know, providing Zoom classes and Zoom support groups or whatever the other platforms are, you know, and also the pandemic has increased our focus. I really think that this concept of loneliness and isolation and the whole world of mental health and mental wellness and destigmatizing anxiety and depression is another thing we're going to carry out of this pandemic and move forward with a new focus on that. So
yeah, when you talk about, you know, what do we do after COVID, and unfortunately we're still kind of in it, but it's getting better, is there some things that we should really reconsider? First of all, don't think you're just going to open the doors and it's going to go back to normal. We're dealing with a lot of different things. Let's talk about emotionally. Emotionally, your residents have dealt with a lot of grief and loss in the last year. A lot of us have dealt with it. So I would say I would do a step process on each of these. So emotionally, are you providing the right emotional support? Do you have grief counseling? Think about this. A senior right now, or some of you have lost 2 or 3 loved ones in this last year. So providing those steps to get slowly back to going. And what I mean by that, and Diana and I have talked about this a lot, is a lot of our residents who have been isolated at home have declined physically, mentally, and emotionally. So it's putting a plan together of how do I get mom back to where she was. So maybe for physically, it's mom used to be able to walk 6 blocks every day. Well, mom can only go up half a block right now to start with. So setting some goals and trying to work towards them slowly. But we need to get people back on a track of getting back out and doing those things. We also want to make sure that mentally that we've addressed all those concerns and issues they've had. I don't think there's one person on this call who hasn't been freaked out, overwhelmed, or anxious in this last year. So making sure that we're making sure, do we have the right mental health services? Are we giving tools to our residents such as Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, deep breathing, things that we do in our communities to help our residents become recentered, which I know sounds crazy to a lot of you, but science proves they have great benefit to those things. So I think it's reestablishing those connections. It's resetting up where is each individual resident at and how can I meet those needs, and making sure you put a plan together, which once again, in a community, you're going to get a care plan where the health team is coming together socially from the enrichment side, health services from the nursing, dining involved, and we're looking at what do we need to do to make this a better point of purpose and connection for this individual person, not the whole group. You have to have some individuality here. So second question, I just want to learn about activities to engage seniors living at home. Well, I hope we've given you some ideas, but if not, we'll give you a few more. Number one, I said it before, if you just Google volunteer opportunities at home, the Library of Congress is looking for volunteers to catalog things online. There are companies looking for proofreaders. So if you have someone at home that used to run a newspaper or was an editor or was an English professor, this would be a great job for them. You can even give tours at NASA online now. So maybe you have someone who is really involved in science. There's also some things that you can engage at home. And this is going to sound crazy, but believe it or not, simple things like taking care of the dog, helping with the laundry, doing gardening outside, making cookies and dropping it off at the neighbor's house and leaving it outside. You don't have to see them during COVID, but you can drop it off for them. Or maybe finding a way to say, hey, I know the neighbor down the street has 3 kids. Mom's a retired teacher. Hey, mom, do you have some activity packets we could put together for the kids so it'd be good for them to do? In our local neighborhood, talk about engaging, people were coming out and doing messages on the street of loves and I love you and doing art with chalk with the kids, socially distanced appropriately. You can also find some things at home is really engaging is once again, finding out what were the hobbies and interests of your loved one and how can you make that happen? It could be a group like Diana talked about, or it could be setting up something at home for you and your family. For example, my mother-in-law loves to sew. So making sure that she has her sewing equipment and she has her materials. And by the way, she's now sewed 1,500 masks. This has been her sole purpose and focus for the last year was to get 1,500 masks sewed so she could help others. Those are great things that you could do at home that can make a huge difference, along with all the virtual opportunities. Diana, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you did very well. There is another couple of questions that kind of tie into it too. One of the ones that I wanted to make sure we address before we run out of time is somebody asked about supporting socialization for a couple in which one of the people has Alzheimer's disease and the other partner does not. And I really wanted to say to whomever asked this question that I think one of the most important things to know is that quite often it is what we would call the well spouse who is at greater risk for loneliness and isolation than their partner whom they are caring for. So the person with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia is getting a lot of their needs met, and Crystal talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're getting their needs met higher up the hierarchy, and the caregiving spouse quite often is very socially isolated because, in fact, they are kind of stuck at the safety level, we call it, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So they are in this crisis mode a lot of the time because of the burden and the stress of caregiving. And it really puts a strain on their social relationships, not to mention the fact that gets in the way of being able to go do the things that they would normally have done. And then you throw in a pandemic where you can't go do things anyway, and there's really a risk there. So I wanted to make sure to highlight that question, because in that case, the well spouse, it's really important for those around to make sure to reach out and offer that support and monitor for signs of depression and anxiety and hopelessness for the caregiver, and make sure to connect them with services and programs that can help manage that. But also, a lot of people don't like the idea of a support group. It sounds kind of depressing to get into a Zoom or sit around in a room with people, all of whom are, kind of dealing with the same issues. Or maybe they feel prideful and they don't want support, from anyone. They just want to privately have their issue. But the truth is, other caregivers who are going through the same thing are an endless source of not just support, but information and tools and ideas. And they're the ones that already have the Zoom music group that they're going to together and that type of thing. So it's a really good idea to connect the caregiving partner with other caregivers. So, Crystal, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that's good, but there is one question on here. I know we have a few minutes, but I want to address it because I think it's a good one, is what kind of activities are there for introverts and those with limited vision and no knowledge of computer technology? So a couple of things. We've given you introverts can garden. You can do some things like baking and cooking and just asking, having a family or drop it off for you. A lot of people are introverted, having some kind of photo album, scrapbook, those things that people can work on one-on-one. Having a pet, if you're introverted, is really nice, because a lot of people that are introverted don't like to hang around a lot of people, but they don't mind having a cute dog or cat to hang out with. So those are some of the things you can do. Volunteering, once again, an introvert. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities that don't require people. It could really be just people who go to work at the library and stock the books in the evening and see nobody around. But with limited vision, I want to give you a couple of things. There is a great organization called the Lighthouse for the Blind that has phenomenal equipment to help people with vision impairment, from macular degeneration all the way to legal blindness in your eyes. A couple of things. Magnifying lamps. There's something called the Lucy flexible lamp that magnifies. A Buddha board, which is a watercolor thing where you touch and it's tactile for people. So if you look at, Google, ideas for people with low vision or no vision. The other thing too is books on tape, music on tape, tactile things. Taking mom out in the sun and giving her a hand and foot massage where she feels the sun and smells the lavender lotion. That is sensory. There are even craft activities set up where you can actually do a taste and smell. Give mom 4 different chocolate bars and see if she can identify what it is, or what is that smell? Once again, the sensory stimulation. So just because people may be introverted or vision issues does not mean they can't have stimulation. And to the no knowledge of computer technology, there are some great things out in the world for people who don't like tech. I know that's a bad thing because people want to embrace it. There's something called Well Connected. It's out of San Francisco, where people who are not technology savvy can log in. It's free. You do an interest checklist. They mail you a catalog and call you on the phone and say, hey, Crystal, I hear you like gardening. There's a 1-800 number we're going to send you. You're going to call in and talk to all the gardeners, and we're going to share our experiences together. And there's a huge catalog. Once again, my mother-in-law is 80. Technology has not been easy for her. She loves this program. She now has 2 pals that she talks to every day for 45 minutes, literally 7 days a week. And she will say, my friend Meryl didn't call me today. I'm really upset. I hope she's okay. But she looks forward to these calls, and it's no tech. It's just people connecting with people. So don't get discouraged.
The old party line.
That's right. Things out there for everybody. So, we hope today that we've given you some information that can help you. We hope today that you can take some things away, and maybe this will give you a different view of looking at, moving into senior living has a lot of great opportunities for connection and purpose and love and belonging. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So we thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all of your time. For myself and Diana, we hope you have a great afternoon. And if there's anything we can help with, our emails have been put out. Please feel free to follow up with us. We'd be glad to help you. Have a great day. And by the way, we hope you find your sense of purpose, because it's critical to your happiness